Eh bien, bonjour à tous et à toutes. C'est un plaisir d'avoir un séminaire plus CEF aujourd'hui. On a souvent des séminaires départementaux, mais euh, on a la chance d'avoir parmi nous euh, Mme Colaço qui euh, est en fait une ingénieure euh, forestière qui est qui a été formée à l'Institut supérieur d'agronomie, en fait, qui est chercheuse à l'Institut supérieur d'agronomie à l'Université de Lisbonne, qui a été formée à l'Université de San Diego de Compostelle en Espagne et qui fait de la recherche dans le domaine de l'écologie forestière. Et dans le cadre d'un programme qui est partagé par le programme Horizon 2020 de l'Union européenne, via les échanges qui se font à travers un programme spécifique qui est le programme Marie Curie d'échanges internationaux des chercheuses et chercheurs. On a eu l'occasion de le vivre à plusieurs reprises au Centre d'études de la forêt avec des étudiants de deuxième et troisième cycle, mais on l'a fait aussi, ça s'est fait aussi beaucoup avec les chercheurs, des chercheurs des divers pays. Et c'est dans cet esprit-là que, si mon souvenir est bon, c'est Christian Messier qui vous a invité à venir passer quelques temps parmi nous pour comprendre un peu plus la façon dont on gouverne et qu'on gère les forêts publiques au Québec. Et on a trouvé que l'idée était très, très bonne, que vous puissiez, that you could give us a seminar today about the role of forest policy on forest and fire management in Portugal, since forest fires is one of the main research axes that we have here in the boreal forest in Canada. And there are a lot of, obviously, a lot of convergent points that can be discussed. So without further ado, I'll invite you to give us your seminar. Thank you very much for being with us.
Merci. I cannot speak French. Well, I can, but just a little bit. And in reality, I cannot have a big conversation or at least doing a seminar in French. So it will be in English. It could be in Portuguese, but I believe that you won't understand anything. So I prefer to do it in English. And well, like Pierre was mentioning, I came here by the Decisiones. So you are all invited also to go to Portugal or to other countries that are also partners, to stay there for 1 month or a little bit more to learn and to exchange experiences. That was what I did in here. So I really thank everyone that received me, because it was really, really good, and it was really a learning process. So I see that Sarah is here. So thank you, Sarah, for listening to me during a lunchtime. And all the other people, Jean-Michel, Christian, Jean-Luc, Melanie, Pierre, good conversations. So this presentation that I'm going to do, it was a presentation that I did with my colleague Francisco Rego, because we work on forest policy and forest governance. And one of the things that we always see is that people forget about the past. And we need to go back to better understand why we are like this today. So I should have put it in here, the historical perspective until present. But, well, the title was already long. We don't need to have more about that. So, like I was mentioning, I work at the University of Lisbon in the Institute of Agronomy. This is our main building that did in 2017 100 years. So when we had the revolution from the monarchy to the democracy, the state gave us a huge farm, and huge for Portugal, not for Canada. It was 100 hectares in the middle of Lisbon. And we could go there, and we are working there since then. I belong to a small research center, Center for Applied Ecology, that we always look at how we can apply ecology to help different stakeholders, different partners that need to implement something that needs to have a very strong ecology background and to work in the field, particularly in a place like Portugal, that we have been with people since more than 20,000 years. This means that we need to work with people. So I have been working more on the social side of the forest, where we are in Europe, next to the ocean, next to Spain. So as you can imagine, we were always fighting Spain, or we were trying to get out and going to other places. We have one of the longest histories in Europe, because our borders started to be defined in 1143 with our king, so our first king. And since around 1150, our borders haven't changed. And for Europe, that is something that it's quite strange because they are always changing. So we are, for good and for bad, one of the countries with the oldest borders in the world. So we had a monarchy, and well, our forests and our fields were, well, visited, and a lot of people live there using small parts of the forest, cutting, burning, so that they could have agriculture and so on. And one of the things that we have a huge coast. Remember, huge perspective. And all this area are sand dunes. And why do I start with the sand dunes that we have? Because that was the beginning of the afforestation by itself of Portugal. Because the population were cutting, sometimes they were planting, but not planting a forest. They were just managing the land for them. And in here, because of the sand dunes, we start the first time to afforestate a land with a view of having a forest that would prevent erosion, would prevent, well, a lot of damages in small villages. So the area that I was showing you, it's an area that due to all the erosion from the mountains, they came from the watershed to the ocean, and also because of the currents of the ocean that always come from north to the south, what happened was that we started to have huge sand dunes that with wind would go inside the villages, would go inside the agriculture. So something was needed to be done. With that, right at the beginning of the kingdom, we have one king that it's King Dom Dinis and Queen Dona Isabel that were the first ones to say, okay, we need to protect the land, so we need to do our first afforestation in the coast wind pines. And the sand dunes, although this is from the beginning of the 20th century, the sand dunes were a little bit like this. So it was like a desert. It was like when I went to Tadoussac, that we saw those dunes that now it's a natural park. I saw them, oh, this is almost our Pinhal area. So our sand dunes. Well, ours is bigger than yours. Sorry. So on those days, they were starting to think, what kind of species could we put in the sand dunes? So would we use Pinus pinea, that it's the stone pine, or should we use the Pinus pinaster, the maritime pine? So these are the two species. The maritime pine, it is what we have there now. But we have some records saying that we also had the stone pine. But due to the use and due to the trunk that it's quite straight in here, and you can imagine that we needed forests to build the ships, so we need to have big and straight trees. So the umbrella pine was used for the curve, but not that much. So it was disappearing, and the maritime pine started to be there much more. Well, the wood was mainly used in the beginning for the construction of boats, for the construction of cities. So all our cities were constructed in wood, so there was a huge demand. And if we weren't planting all the time, we were going to start not having the forest. So we had a lot of policies that obliged the population and also obliged the forest services to plant on these dunes. Well, we are walking throughout the centuries, and one of the first attempts, one of the first scientific attempts to cover those sand dunes with trees, because they did it with the kings, but they were not so successful. So we have one of the first attempts using the science with José Bonifácio Andrade e Silva, that learned in Germany, went to Brazil, come back. So we have a lot of things in our forestry that came also from the Brazilians, from the indigenous people from Brazil, that also working with the colonizers. They taught us a lot of things that we still use. So in here, it's one of the books from 1815 that explain how to use the trees, how we can plant, how we can manage. In here, we see a map where you can see that the coast is completely full of where we need to plant the trees to protect all the villages that were around here, that have rivers that are very good for agriculture, but have the problem of the sand, not the erosion. So we learn from a lot of countries, and a lot of countries also learn with us. And well, Portugal always had a very close relationship with France. So in France, in 1883, they've created one thing that is called the forest regime forestier, my perfect accent. So that forest regime was implemented in Portugal even when we were still in the monarchy. So in 1901 to 1903, we started to have these pioneer laws that said that in public lands, we need to plant trees, manage the trees, so that we can protect the soil, we can protect the water basins, and so on. So we have two things in Portugal because of that forest regime. We have the total, that it's only applied to the state lands, that you also have it in here, but you had a reform in 1982 or 83, I don't remember the date exactly. So total for the public areas and partial for the communal areas. And this was also one of the reasons why I came here, to understand if you had communal areas and how you work with them. So with the forest regime, okay, it came a lot of money, well, kind of. And we had our best engineers trying to recover the sand dunes in a way that would protect the villages, and also that they could plant and do more production of wood. They used a lot of innovations for those days, where they would put the palisades, and when the sand wind will come, they would have this system that would pull the palisades up, and then it stayed there so that more sand could come, and then with that they would, well, preserve the dunes in a way that it would go to the villages. But, well, we are in a forest school, so as we know, well, sand is not a very rich soil, if we can say that sand is soil, that we cannot. So we had to use a lot of pine litter and shrubs so that we could have some organic matter in a way that we can put the pine, so we can afforestate with pine. And, well, the area is quite big. It has more than 20,000 hectares. This makes that we needed a lot of people. We were in an area that it's really poor. So one of the things that the forest regime did was to give employment to a lot of people. Also to create a lot of different conditions that they wouldn't have, like connections, roads, like phone. We are talking on the 20th. So 20th century, 1920. So it was quite long ago. Of course, it had a lot of problems, but there were some social and economical really important stuff occurring. And here you can see all the work that they have been doing. And of course, the sand with the rivers, the water basins that were crossing, also had a lot of gulfs and a lot of erosion. So more innovations for those days. So they have created dams, modular dams for erosion control that are still there, and we can see it. And some forest products that are non-wood forest products started to appear and give job for the communities on the surroundings. Well, they need to take the logs to the cities, so more innovation, they needed to have a train to carry. But if we have forest, we have a fire problem. Mm-hmm. Well, something, it's like 1 + 1, it's 2. And so what were the policies that on those days they were using? So Marquês de Pombal was our minister. So after we had a huge earthquake in 1755 that destroyed, although people said, oh, it only destroyed Lisbon, it was quite strong, and it destroyed completely Lisbon, but all the other small villages in Spain, so for instance, Granada, also it was destroyed, Granada, Sevilla, so all those regions were destroyed, but because they had less people, that's why we don't talk, because a disaster only occurs when people are there. If not, it's only a natural occurrence event. So Marquês de Pombal was our minister. And if you go to Lisbon, you will see that one of the things that he did was the downtown of the city that was like all the major cities in Europe, all connected with roads that don't go to anywhere. It's really a mess. He decided, no, we are going to build the city in squares. So it is now like you have in here. So all the squares, and that was an innovation for those days in Europe. And to use that, to build that, we needed a lot of wood. So the Pinhal de Leiria, that part of the sand dunes, those pines were really, really important. But, well, we needed to protect from the fire. So one of the first things that we did, so we needed to have glass for the houses. So we needed to have fuel to feed the glass factory. The glass factory, it's right next to the sand dunes because we have sand and we have fuel. And with that, they could, could manufacture the glasses. When we use the fuel wood, we are taking out of the forest a lot of fuel that could create a huge wildfire. So in reality, it was preventing fires on those days. This is the factory that now it's a museum of glass next to the pine stands. But also another thing that happened was, so we had this gentleman, Frederico Varnhagen, that he was a pioneer. He was a pioneer of prescribed fire in pine forests. So this is the oldest record that I'm aware that it is written in a scientific way how to put fire in the winter time in a way that we prevent wildfires in summertime. So it was this gentleman, and he wrote, I'm not going to read but all of it, but one of the things that he says in here, it is, so there is a safe way to get rid of wildfires in the summertime if we put fire in dry winter days to the, and now I don't know the name in English, the leaves of the pines.
Later.
Okay. Thank you. So we put fire in winter, dry days in winter to the winter, and between the pines, because the fire will burn it, but it won't damage the tree. So in here we have the beginning of the prescribed fire. And because they wanted to have all the things really straight to manage it, this guy, this gentleman, the Bernardino Barros Gomes, said, okay, let's do a plantation with buffers so that we can go there and do the management. So each stand with different ages can be managed in a better way. And we still have those lines. So due to the forest regime, we had fire lookouts. Probably your old fire lookouts are a little bit like this, or even taller. And we have the forest guards. This guy is going to extinguish a wildfire. So you can imagine, there they go with a shovel, and there they go to extinguish the fire. But those were the fires in the old days that were, now I'm going to say normal, that were, well, low fires with not that much intensity. And then we reach 2017. So this is the village that has the Museum of Glass. There is the fire, it's the pine stands from the sand dunes. And this was the fire of 2017. It was a huge amount of energy, really close to the village. And it was the first time that winter, we had the population of Portugal having a demonstration saying that we should protect the king's pine because it was something that is not only environment, but it's also heritage. It was the first time, and this is something that for us, we can think, oh, well, people are always fighting for the environment. No, it was in the middle of the biggest square in Lisbon, people shouting, saying that we need to do something. That doesn't mean that they did, but we can discuss that later on. But in reality, wildfires always occurred in the Pinhal do Leiria, that it's that area. So these are the fires between 1975 and 2019. And of course, the 2017 fire covered almost everything. And let me tell you, I work with wildfires since 2002, and I believe it was the first time that I cried because of a fire, because it was so, so intense. But fires, well, it seems that we have lost most of our knowledge, because you saw that we had Varnhagen that knew how to put fire to manage the land and prevent wildfires. So the fires of that pinal, the pines from that pinal, they are very good. So the Australian came to Portugal and took some of our pine seeds, and they did some improvement, genetic improvement, and now they have, and now this is really huge stands in Australia. But what did they do? They learned from our ancestors. We didn't, but they did. So one of the things that they do, so they have the sand, it's almost like in Portugal, but they do prescribe burning. And because the area is so big, they will do it by helicopters or with that 4-wheel with flame throwers, and they protect the forest stands. So, like Francisco, my colleague, likes to say, this guy is Varnhagen in Australia. So he's the one that is protecting, and it's something that we could do in Portugal. But if there's no will, and if we are always afraid of wildfires, that we cannot use fire, or say that we can, most of the times we cannot use fire, that is a big problem. So what we have seen it is that, well, there is, because of forest regime, in the public land, we have a lot of innovative forest policies and techniques, but we have lost a lot of historical learnings, so we should revisit them. But, well, in here you are almost all public, isn't it? Well, in Portugal, we only have 2% of public lands. 84% it's private, and around 14% it's communal lands. So we call it baldios. These are the main species that we have: eucalyptus, Britain pine, cocoa, comoke, stone pine, and then other species. So the forest regime for the public lands was total forest regime. They have the rules they have to follow every time. Then for the communal lands, the communal property, it's only partial regime. So this means that they only have a small part that needs to follow all the rules. And in Portugal, what are the communal lands that are different from yours? So our communal lands are areas with forested landscapes and pastures. And usually they are located in the mountainous areas, and they are owned or managed by the community. So it's the community that have an assembly, that have a board, and decide what to do. But because they are inside the forest regime, they needed to forest the area. And also it was because this area was becoming, because of the mountains, because of excess of grazing, we are starting to have a lot of erosion. So that's why they wanted to protect it. So these areas, that all the management of the money that comes goes to the communities, they started to be forested in 1939 with the recognition. Here they are forestating.
Thank you.
They're giving a course this afternoon, that's why they have to leave.
No problem. And in Portugal, they are located mostly in the northern part. And for you, this is nothing, but having 500,000 hectares of communal lands, that the average of the area is around 400 hectares for each. For the northern part of Portugal, it's a lot because the average of the private owners in the northern part, it's around 2 to 3 hectares. So you can imagine how important these areas are. And what we have seen with the forest regime, it is that, well, Portugal, the public that are mainly in the coastal line and in some areas, they are the total forest regime, but the partial forest regime, well, it is included in 70% of the communal lands. So if we didn't have the communal lands, we wouldn't have that forest so big and the pine stands like we have. So we had a dictatorship between 38 and 70. This means that although there was some good stuff happening with the forest regime, like the employment, like connections and so on, in reality, the communities were really oppressed. For them to go and get some fuel wood for their houses, they had to have permission. And I have stories of people that worked with me that were saying, well, I was a young kid, I went to grab some small branches and the guards came and put me in jail. So, as always, there are good and bad things. And with the dictatorship, there were a lot of things, particularly on the oppression, that was quite bad. And in reality, they took all the communal areas from the communities. So when we had the revolution from the dictatorship to the democracy, we had the return of those communal areas to the communities. And now they needed to start managing their areas again and learning how to do it. And because of that, most of them are co-managing the area with the forest services. However, we did a study, I, Irina, and Francisco, and some colleagues, we did a study to understand which were the investments in the communal areas. They were investing in what now that they are, well, they are independent. So the forests are decreasing, the investment on those. The pastures are increasing. These are stable. Then we have the wind farms that are increasing because they are looking for the top of the mountains. And the stone extraction, it's more or less stable. But why aren't they investing in forests? Because we have wildfires every year. So this is the area that burned in 2017. You remember that picture with the smoke? It's this area. So it was quite strong. And it was for the first time that we had civilian fatalities, this much civilian fatalities. So it was like a big, big disaster. And there was a shift in the managing of the land, in the policies, more in the policies than in the management of the land, because the management of the land depends on the privates. So Irina, in her PhD, she wanted to answer to this question. So after all, what burns more? It's the private area, it's the public, or it's the communal? And looking at this with from 1975 to 2017, what she saw was that the communal areas are the ones that are burning more. And even with the different modalities between them, they see that the modality 4, that is the municipality that manages, it's not the communers, it's not the population, it's the the municipality, they even burn more. But there is a reason for that. If we think that they are in the mountains and fire loves slopes, they have forest. Fire loves forest. They have people that by tradition use the fire. So we have the renewal of the pastures, we have some small practices, very old, that people use fire, and sometimes it escapes. So this was a problem, and inside the project Communal Lands, Safer Lands, that I coordinate, and that is also why I'm here, and Irina also is here. We are trying to understand how we can manage the communal lands in a way that it's much safer for them, and that we don't look to the private land because they have other problems, but in here we can manage because they are big. So this is the hazard map that we were doing, and we see that 70% of them have very high RI hazard. So the government, looking at this, decided to help them to create clusters. So now it's not only one unit of 400 hectares that will need to manage by itself, but they join different units that are nearby and created clusters. So in 10 clusters, we can manage around 56,000 hectares. And with this, we have 55 baldios, those communal units, that are working together. So one of the things that we are doing with them, and I'm finishing, it is we are co-creating a risk map with the communities. This is, I don't know how it is in here, but in Portugal, the civil protection, the firefighters, they have a law that they must follow. First, they protect people, then their livelihoods, and then they will go to other things like forest, agriculture, and so on. So that is the main rule. What happens in the communal lands, and many times the fire starts outside and then enters in the communal lands, it is that they usually don't have houses there. So they can prioritize the other things that they really cherish and value. So what we are doing with them is, with their maps, with their knowledge, with the communities, we can choose with them which are the places or the tree or the area or the archaeological, wherever they feel that they really need to protect. So that when they decide where it is, we do two things with them. First, we plan the prevention, because we can do things there. It's there on land, so we can manage it. We can do some grazing, change the land use, whatever. And also to give to the civil protection so that when a fire enters there, they will know how to prioritize their extinction orders. Because there they don't have the people to protect. Now they can protect all the values that the community cherish and wants to maintain. These are our colleagues, so I'm there. Pedro, Francisco, Irina, and Catarina, they are my colleagues that have been working with me and on these topics for a long time. And well, only Catarina wasn't able to come here, but all of us, we were visiting your beautiful country. And thank you, merci, obrigada, and it's done.
Merci. Are there questions online?
Not sure, but there's people on.
Well, let's start with people online.
School things, I don't see it in.
We have to leave, but was I like it. The historical perspective, it's really interesting.
Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Are there any questions coming from our audience on Zoom?
Are you sleeping?
I have a question. I was intrigued by the last part where you mentioned about the values of the community, how they identify it. So is it the actual people, or is it the chief of the community? Like, is it a representative that decides the value? It's really a survey between everyone. Because we have a little bit things like that with our First Nation, where, you know, but at what level is the decision made?
So the chief belongs to the community, and usually we bring more than one people from the community. I don't know how it is in here, but in most of the areas, people, well, they say a lot of things, but when they need to go to meetings and discuss, they say, no, the chief, he knows what he has to say. So in our meetings with the communities, what we have, because the communal lands, they can be inside different municipalities, natural parks. So we have a huge amount of actors that have something to say there. So we try to have at least 2 or 3 persons from the community, and then 1 representative from the municipality, from the firefighters, from the forest authority, from the national parks, and so on.
So you have a lot of stakeholders that are, you know, living together in these communal lands. And I guess that the discussions are with all the representatives of
Representatives or technicians, when we have technicians, because when we already had all those meetings, when we go to the higher level, it's a mess, because they have priorities that are their own in reality. So we try to put all together and put them to discuss. So one of the really strong things that we need to do is to mediate the discussion. So sometimes it's up to me, and it's quite demanding and challenging, because the forest services, many times they have particularly not so much the forest service, but civil protection and the firefighters is, no, wildfire, we need to protect this. And then we need to say, no, okay, we need to protect this, but we also have some endangered species in here that people value. So we cannot cut just because we need to cut. No, we need to protect that area. Or because there is a wolf, those areas in the mountains, it is where we have our last wolves, flock. It's not flock. How do you say when it is a group of wolves?
pack, wolf packs.
So many times we have the nature conservation say, no, we need to protect it. And we have the communers saying, no, we need to protect because this is part of our management. We need to have them. And then we have the president of the municipality saying, no, because you know that they eat the animals. And so it's always challenging.
How long the contract?
Sorry?
How long is the contract? So what is the cycle of the?
So these are research projects that we are implementing with them. And one of the research project, it's 4 years. But one of the things that we did, particularly with this project with Pedro, that is in the picture, we are working directly since the beginning of the project, since the writing of the project, the communers are working directly with us. So they are partners from the project. So the idea it is that now we discuss, we try, we experiment, this works, this doesn't work, and then they can use it in a way that it's more prevalent.
And do you have surveys about how the people are happy with the
With the work.
Yeah.
We are in the middle of the work, but for instance, one of the things that we did when we came here, we had a lot of meetings with, some meetings with First Nations, some meetings with foresters, also with Christian and Federico and Anik, the lady that did the PhD with him, that it's over there. And he was quite happy, and he was sending messages to the colleagues, and I believe they want that we do more. But as researchers, many times we cannot do much more than what we are doing. But I believe they are happy because now they have tools so that they can present to the forest services or to the municipality saying, no, we can protect this, so please do something. Because we will manage the land because they have funds, we will manage. But now with the fires, you need to look of what we say and what our communers are saying, particularly because these areas are mountains, so you don't have that many roads that the civil protection knows how to reach the fire. So now again, they have more tools to say, please use our communers to learn how to reach the sites and protect it. So it's one step at a time, but we are trying. It's a challenge. We are trying, yes.
Well, the catastrophic fire of 2017, did it start in the communal lands?
No.
Or in the public lands?
So we had a huge amount of the different ignition sources. So in the public land, what it is in all the investigation that the police did, it was like a barbecue that went badly. But well, 2017 was a particular year because for the first time we had the extreme wildfires. So usually people talk about Pedrógão Grande. It is something that now everyone talks because it died around 60 people on the road. And it was in June. So it was something outside the fire season. And that was because we had a downburst. So during those days, the humidity was very, very low. We had like a thunderstorm. The sky was really dark, but the energy, when it started, the energy was so big, then all the convection column came down. So it was incredible.
Can you just remind me what was the size of the fire in terms of thousands of hectares?
The 2017?
2017, yeah.
It was around 450,000. No, it was quite big, and you saw in reality, it was like we had too close, or it was like a cloud that did like this in the country. I can show you here. They are so you had the communal areas around here. These are the state forest, and this is private.
Okay, so the state part was still under prescribed burning?
No.
No, why did that stop?
Sorry?
Why did the prescribed burning stop? That was.
Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also.
No,
Stock or?
since the 80s,
Yeah.
the forest services and been decreasing the number of employees
Ah,
and the strength. It has to do with policies in Portugal. First, the forest area was really strong, the forest authorities. Then it went to the agriculture offices. The other part stayed with the forest. Then it went to the environment. Then it was always jumping. So most of the strength that the forest services had, the knowledge was lost in the middle of it.
prescribed burning was not important in the private.
No, it is, but we had that in the 19th century, isn't it? Then people forgot it, and it was in the 70s that it came again to Portugal, again with the French, with Spanish, and so on, with the Americans, with Comarec from Tall Timbers, that went there, talked with the people that started to do. But it was like some experiments, because I imagine it is a little bit like in here. Fire can be a very good tool, but you need to know a lot about fire. So the chance that it will escape, it's very easy. So people thought, no, you can do that, but just in the small area. So the small area was around here in the natural park, because the manager, the director, was a guy that, no, we will do it. So it was Moreira da Silva. It was the grandfather is Van Hagen, and Moreira da Silva is the father. Then, well, the guy became old, and then no, just for small experiments. And then Francisco Rego arrived to do his PhD. So he started to do more, and he came to Idaho to do his PhD. So he was still burning more. Then in 2006, so and the prescribed burning started with, we do it, we don't do it. Other countries were doing, Portugal, no, fires, that's all. 2006, we had a huge project, European project, that it was called Fire Paradox. And with Fire Paradox, it was the first time that in Europe, everyone was talking, no, we can use fire to protect the land. So fire is a good tool. That's why it's a paradox. If it is controlled, it's good. If it is not controlled, it's really bad. And so prescribed burning started to grow again in the country. Then Francisco Rego was the coordinator of the project, and then he went for the director of the Forest Authority. And with that, there was a real strong impulse and started to have a lot of people burning. But then he exited the forest services. And in here we can talk about fire, and we can agree that sometimes it's not good, but sometimes it's good. In the forest services, they have not a very narrow mind, but the directors, they have a very strong idea of what they want, and many times they don't listen. So after Francisco went out of the forest services, the guy said, no, you are not going to use fire. Use fire to protect and use fire to fight fires, because on those days we could fight fire with fire. So everything was again mocked. So we started to again not having the management by fire. And for the last 10 years, it regrew again. So coming down.
A back and forth situation related to people, and there's a lot of convergence in what you're saying about prescribed fires in Portugal and what is going on in Canada and Quebec particularly, because it's the same kind of it's kind of a vision that foresters have, that fire protection agencies have, versus how it could be ecologically used. We have had one of our research forests in northern Quebec, the Lake du Paquet research and research forest. We experienced 2 prescribed burnings of very small areas in the last 20 years. It took us, I don't know how many discussions with the Forest Service and with the Fire Protection Agency to do these prescribed burnings. And it has been the same kind of reaction from them to, no, you cannot do that, and it's very time consuming to do it, and they provided us a lot of argument not to do it, but finally we got to do it for a research project. So it's conducted at a very small scale.
Parks Canada has a prescribed fire burning plan. So they, again, for more like research, and so in National Parks of Canada, they do prescribed burning projects, like, because there's an ecologist at the head of each park, and they understand and they do their tests in the protected areas.
And they burn it with the communities, if there is First
There's no
Nations
one
there.
living in there.
Living there. So,
Not in the areas where no, it's really, natural parks.
yeah, because I didn't show you because, well, we don't have time to show everything, but I did a work with a colleague that it's called Emmanuel, that we were looking for the remains of traditional fire in Portugal, and also the historical legislation that how did we manage fire through history. And it's quite funny because even in the pre-Roman, so 2000 years ago, fire was used, but the legislation was said, and it's not legislation like we have written, it is the legislation of the commons, so the laws. It was, if there is a damage, you will be whipped.
Mm-hmm.
Then throughout the centuries, if there is a damage, so you could use, but if there is a damage, you are whipped and you pay. And then suddenly, because of the kings, because of the need of the forest, what has changed it is that now it is not the damage by itself, but it is the protection. So we need to protect this area because of the trees, because we need the trees for the boats, or you need the trees for construction. So you cannot burn there. So it's always the restriction, always. No, you cannot burn, you cannot burn. But in reality, our landscapes, and I believe most of the landscapes in the world, not all, but a lot of them, and you are ecologists, they were managed and they were built with fire.
Yeah.
This fire occurred everywhere where we have vegetation and some dryness. It can be a lightning, it can be a rock, it can be so many things that start a fire that will manage. And Portugal, it was completely managed by fire, or because of the wars. There is a law, I believe it's from the 13th century, that we were fighting the Spanish, saying you cannot burn unless it is to fight and kill those guys that are coming. There are a lot of things like this. So it's something that, well, we need to rethink the way that we see fire. But it's quite hard, and well, in Europe, we are trying with different European projects, and it's changing a lot, the way that people see it. But we continue to have one thing that I imagine that you also have in here, that is people live all in the city. So they are starting to be disconnected with the landscape. and with the factors or with the drivers that manage the landscape. So when we talk, even after these wildfires that we had, that in 3 or 4 days burned more than 100,000 hectares, people say, no, fire is bad. You cannot use it. Or it is because of climate change, or it is because it's bad for the nature, or it is because the trees will die, or it is because the animals will die. While we know, as ecologists, that prescribed burning or cultural burning or whatever we want to call it, do it in the right way, with the right prescription, looking in all the conditions, it can be really good for the environment and for the ecology of the land.
And for the survival of communities, because when fires become as big as they are, it's a mess for a large amount of the population.
And more, if we think, and this is a very rough comparison. For us, the communities that live in the field, in those communal areas, not in all, but in many of them, fire is like an empowerment tool for them, because they could manage the land. They could manage, because if they burn in here, they burn this patch and then the other, they know that their cattle can go there and will have pasture. And they know if they burn in here, and they will have the shrubs with the berries and with whatever. And if they burn there, they will have some new fertilizers that will help for their management. And in here, I've seen a little bit with the indigenous that to do with this. It is that it's
Well, thank you very much for that interesting presentation that provides us another perspective of forest management, fire management, and how it is very different between what is going on here in North America with very large wildfires, but that occur in areas that are much less populated than what countries in Europe and have to deal with, which is very different, but quite interesting in terms of the dynamics of ecosystems, fire, and people. Thank you very much.